Welcome, everybody, to the New Jersey Forests Forum for a series of presentations on the need for standards for the stewardship of our publicly owned forests. My name is Elliott Ruga. I am the Director of Policy and Communications at the New Jersey Highlands Coalition, which is hosting the forum. Forests cover approximately 2 million acres in New Jersey, equally split between the forests that are publicly and privately owned. Forests provide for us a multitude of natural resource values: drinking water production and storage, habitats for a wide diversity of plant and animal species, numerous options for accessible outdoor recreation, air filtration, flood control, carbon absorption and storage, aesthetic appreciation, spiritual renewal. Considering this extensive array of natural services, what are we doing to ensure the long-term viability of these forests? As the climate warms, the carbon sequestration potential of the forest is increasingly critical for mitigating against climate impacts. Yet New Jersey has no standards specifically for the stewardship or management of our publicly owned forests. Currently, we make no distinction between the privately owned and publicly owned forest when approving management and stewardship plans. The standards for public lands are the exact same criteria developed to qualify privately owned farmland and woodlands for a significant reduction in property taxes as an incentive not to develop the property. We need to approach the restoration, management, and stewardship of our public forests with higher standards so that we maximize the forest's ecological services and natural resource values, including carbon sequestration, without compromising because of concerns about infringing on private property rights. Under current practices, we tread very carefully on managing public lands, as if private property rights were at risk of being tread upon. For example, one of the Highlands Act 17 exemptions includes an exemption for woodland management plans or the normal harvest of forest products in accordance with a forest management plan approved by the state forester. This exemption may be reasonable for private property, but why would we exempt a forest stewardship plan on public lands from the Highlands Act's 300-foot open water buffer, the 1,000-foot buffer for vernal pools, or steep slope protections? Inside of the nearly pristine Highlands core forest, why would we allow activities that threaten the natural resource values on land the public purchased specifically to protect those resources from disturbances? Exemptions are included in New Jersey's land use regulations because private property rights are constitutionally protected. Exemptions are a safety measure in order to prevent a claim of a taking of property. On public property, however, there are no private property rights to protect. Publicly owned land is held in the public trust, as are regulated wetlands, steep slopes, and other environmentally sensitive features. On private property, exemptions protect the private interest. On public property, what private interest is protected by the exemption? If you are unable to identify a private interest to protect, the exemption is erroneous. That is why we are asking the legislature to clarify that the exemption for forestry activities in the Highlands Preservation Area was meant to address private property only. By pointing out this discrepancy in no way suggests that the New Jersey Highlands Coalition promotes commercial logging on private land. That is a different forum for a different day. Some might say that forestry management activities differ from development activities, that they are not permanent and therefore should not be as strictly regulated. We do not agree. The impacts from mechanized logging are devastating to sensitive ecologies. They provide footholds for non-native species invasions. They destroy occupied habitats. They disrupt hydrologic flows. Plus, the area of impact is far greater than the mere footprint of the disturbance. In the New Jersey Flood Hazard Area Control Act rules, which implements a regulated riparian zone, forestry activities are exempt if the New Jersey Forestry and Wetlands Best Management Practices Manual is followed. That manual has not been updated since 1990, predating current wetlands and flood hazard area rules, predating contemporary science and research, and a finer understanding of the functional values of wetlands and riparian zones and the entire context of climate change. We must implement the highest level of protection on our most environmentally sensitive and resource-rich forests. On public lands, it is a matter of protecting the public's interest. Currently, forest management in places such as Sparta Mountain are implemented in the context of habitat manipulation projects. That is, to promote a certain habitat that is favored by a species in decline. The costs of implementing such a project are often recovered by allowing the contractor to take out timber that is felled in the operation and sell it for the timber value. The problem with such an approach is that the management activity must be large enough in size and scope so that the contractor can extract enough timber that it is worth their time. In such cases, board foot values become more important than the ecological goal, and the size of the operation and its impacts can far exceed what is needed to meet the ecological goals of the project. Often, public land where forest stewardship projects are proposed are in our most mature and ecologically healthy forests, places that need stewardship the least. But that is where the tallest, straightest, most healthy trees still exist in New Jersey. Where stewardship is most needed, the forests with the highest deer populations and the most invaded by non-native species, these are where stewardship is badly needed, but rarely proposed. This is why we need regulations that address forest stewardship for publicly owned forests, so that stewardship occurs where it is needed and a system to pay for stewardship is put in place that does not include the harvesting of timber. Last October, a series of 4 bills were introduced in the Assembly concerning forest stewardship on public lands. These bills would have required most municipal, county, state, and nonprofit-owned forested lands of 25 acres or more to draft and implement forest stewardship plans per the low standards of the existing forest stewardship program, which were developed for private property owners. In addition, municipalities would be prohibited from passing any ordinance that would attempt to regulate or interfere with a forest stewardship plan, and it would override any existing municipal ordinance that required municipal approval of a forest stewardship plan. Because of the public outcry, these bills and the overwhelming opposition to them, as expressed in the legislative committee hearing, it appears that these bills will not be introduced in the current legislative session, which began in mid-January. Had these bills passed, the inadequate standards applied today to approve forest stewardship plans would have become required. Our call to develop a set of higher standards to apply specifically for our public forests would have been preempted and silenced. To have an idea how this scenario would have played out across New Jersey, we can look at what recently occurred at a municipal-owned forest in Warren County. Early last spring, someone happened to be driving on Harmony Brass Castle Road, where it passes through Roaring Rock Park in Washington Township in Warren County. Somebody who could recognize the meaning of the markings that were painted on a large number of healthy trees, indicating that they were to be cut down. Upon investigation, it was found that the township had contracted with a forester to log a municipal-owned forest to help balance the municipal budget. The contract specified that the contractor and the municipality would split the proceeds from the sale of timber, 80% going to the municipality, 20% going to the contractor. Brass Castle Creek runs through Roaring Rock Park. Not only is it a Category 1 trout production stream, which receives a 300-foot riparian zone under the flood hazard area rules, Roaring Rock Park is in the Highlands Preservation Area, where all Highlands open waters receive a 300-foot Highlands open water buffer. However, as the forestry plan was exempted from both the Highlands and flood hazard rules, it had to follow the New Jersey Forestry and Wetlands best management practices, where a streamside management zone of only between 25 and 70 feet is required. It should be noted that Brass Castle Creek is also a wild trout stream with a heritage strain of brook trout, a very rare occurrence in New Jersey. Phase 1 of the Forest Stewardship Plan for Roaring Rock Park was implemented in June. As you can see in the images taken during the operation, trees were cut right up to the bank of the stream, and a stream crossing was made with little regard for the integrity of the waterway. If the assembly bills were passed and signed into law, what occurred at Roaring Rock Park could take place on public forests across New Jersey, and there would be no way to stop it. Because of the public outcry against the logging of Roaring Rock Park, Washington Township canceled its contract with the forester, and any further logging of the park was halted. And because of the public outcry against a series of assembly forestry bills, it looks like they have expired with the close of the 2021 legislative session. If they have done any good, is that they have illustrated for us the urgency to develop appropriate standards for stewardship for our publicly owned forests. The series of presenters we have lined up for this forum will discuss in detail what we believe are the bases for developing these standards, which will focus primarily on ecological restoration. They will discuss the latest science-based research and findings with respect to forest science, forest ecology, carbon sequestration, and more. The New Jersey Highlands Coalition's Natural Heritage Committee, which includes representatives from the forested regions of New Jersey, including the Highlands, the Pinelands, the Sauerland Mountains, and the Ridge and Valley, have been researching and discussing principles for forest stewardship for public lands for over 2 years. We have developed a statement of principles upon which legislation that maximize the public forest's natural resource values should be based. We have shared this statement of principles with Senator Smith and with the governor. All registered participants will receive in their email a package of literature, including the statement of principles. Before we hear from the other scientists, we have next the senator who chairs what he proudly calls the most interesting committee meeting in the State House. Senator Smith, chair of the Senate Environment and Energy Committee, will not be retiring to the home for aged New Jersey senators for a long time, and certainly not before he has successfully passed a Forest Stewardship for Public Lands Act. Senator Smith is here with us to discuss is developing legislation and why this legislation is important for New Jersey. So with great pleasure, I'm turning it over to Senator Bob Smith.
Thank you, Elliott. I have no idea where that retirement home comment came from, but wherever it is, stuff it back in the file, please. We have been trying for decades to try and mold forest policy in the state of New Jersey. And what I am now convinced of is that we need a new approach, maybe an old approach, but we need a different approach. Everybody on this call realizes how important New Jersey's forests are. Put it in the global context. One of the reasons, usually not listed in the top one or two, but one of the reasons that we're in such trouble on global climate change is that we human beings have been attacking forests all over the world. And we really need to come to a better way. Right now, I try not to be a pessimist on global climate change, but we're in a really bad spot. It's going to get worse. New Jersey is going to see more of it. And property damage, people's lives are at stake. We had 30 people die during the Ida downfall, which was just 9 inches of water falling out of a storm. And one of the biggest problems with global climate change is as the planet gets hotter and hotter, more moisture gets stored in the atmosphere. The rough rule of thumb, for every degree, there's a 7% greater capacity for water storage. So we're going the wrong way worldwide on forests. There's not even a question about it. New Jersey, we can do better. And what I would ask everybody to do so that we can get good policies, keep an open mind. You know, there are many diverging views on what is sustainability for forests and how they should be properly stewarded or managed. And there is this ugly word, it's a 7-letter word, logging, that continually gets in the way of any discussion of forest policy. So, and I've seen this decades of this stuff. So we're gonna go to a new paradigm. And the new paradigm we used successfully when we talked about beach access. And the 368 participants on this call may or may not be aware of what that program was or how we did it. But what we did, we asked all the interested parties, and your only credential is you had to be interested. And we literally had hundreds of people participate. We set up a task force, and the task force on beach access. And the goal, the charge that they were given was, tell me what you can agree on. What is it that, you know, no matter who you are in the forestry community, what are the principles upon which there could be consensus? And then don't hesitate to put together the other side of the report, is what is it we can agree on? Now, in that instance, I believe we ended up with a beach access bill, a bill that was pretty good, and set some overall guiding principles for the state and for the DEP, which I think has been very environmentally protective, but at the same time provided some reasonableness in terms of how we were managing our shore resources. I think the time has come for that to happen in forestry. So at our first meeting, which will be February the 10th, we're going to announce the formation of the task force. We're going to ask leaders who have been very prominent in the forestry discussion to come forward to be co-chairs. You know, probably have about 4 of them, and from differing points of view. And then we're going to ask them to have meetings where the forestry community can attend, either by the internet or in person. And we can start going through the issues. In the case of beach access, it took about 6 months for there to be a consensus report and then a report on what we can agree on. And we then put that into beach access legislation that ultimately passed. We're going to do that now. And we'll get started hopefully in February. We'll get some chairs appointed. If anybody's interested, send in your cards and letters. But all the stakeholders are going to be invited. I think you have 369 participants at the moment. If Elliott and the team would send us their email addresses or keep them for this new task force, everybody will be invited. We'd like everybody's participation. And at the end of the day, we want to have a forestry policy in New Jersey that is going to help us prevent as much climate change as we can, deal with this logging issue so that people are comfortable that we're not finding ways to cut down our forests, and help us with your knowledge and experience. So that's a coming on February the 10th. And we hope you'll be looking forward to it, and we hope you'll participate in it. I'd also like to point out that about a month ago, there was a terrific article in the New York Times magazine section about how various types of forests that had been stewarded in different ways held up to forest fires. And I think that would also be somewhat instructive. You might want to take a look at it, or you might not, but it was a terrific article. And we're going to try and get Elliott the reference so that if anybody actually wants to take a look at it, they can do that. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. We're going to try by the end of the year to have a consensus report and the objecting report, and try and get legislation passed in this session. I will tell you, we've been trying for 30 years. And the only real legislation we got passed was the forest stewardship on private properties in order to get farmland assessment. But I think we can do a lot better, and the people on this call can help us to get the right thing done. So with that, Elliott, I told you I was doing a drive-by, so I have appointments for the rest of the day.
Right.
But let me wish everybody a very good, instructive, educational program today. And let me ask you for your participation in the Forestry Stewardship Task Force. And on that note, everybody have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Well, I hope it will be a painless process, but something tells me I doubt it. But we got to try, right?